Welcome! In this video we're going to continue work on RLCI, and RLCI is an experimental CI/CD system that I'm working on. And I'm trying to do the development of it in an agile fashion, trying to practice agile methodologies. So in each video I'm trying to complete one story to make the CI system a bit more useful for the end user. And in this episode, we're going to work on isolating a pipeline run. So currently when RLCI executes a pipeline, it does so in the current working directory, which can contain anything. So we want to isolate the execution of a pipeline to a new empty workspace, so it doesn't depend on what the file system looks like when it's run. However, before we tackle that improvement of the CI/CD system, I'm going to work on a series of refactorings. I'm going to start with some small ones to clean up some stuff, and then make a couple of bigger ones to actually improve the design on a bit larger scale, and trying to improve it in a direction that will make it easier to add the new feature, the new thing that we're working on in this story. First, I want to clean up some sorting of imports. I like to have my imports sorted in alphabetic order. When I'm doing this, I'm thinking that perhaps we should have a linter in place that detects these mistakes and tells me about it before I commit. But I'm not sure if that's worth it or not. Next, I noticed when I was reading the code for RLCI that an import was not correct. When we moved functionality from the 0pi script to the RLCI file, the import didn't change accordingly. This is not a problem in practice because the thing that we're importing is imported into 0pi as well, but RLCI should not have a dependency on the 0pi script. Next, I want to do a refactoring to extract or convert the RLCI module into an RLCI package so that we can more easily split RLCI into multiple modules. Next, I want to extract a module for the pipeline functionality that is currently in RLCI. So let's create a pipeline.py file and extract all the classes related to pipeline definition and execution to that file. In the process of doing so, I also noticed that the observable class needed to be moved as well, so that it could be accessed from both modules. So I had to move that one first before I could actually move the pipeline classes. Next, I wanted to improve the way pipeline classes read. So I wanted to make it a bit more clear that a pipeline is executed in a runtime environment where it can do certain stuff like run shell commands. Next, I want to move the tests as well for the pipeline functionality. Currently the tests are in the RLCI app, and I want to move the test closer to the functionality that is testing. So I begin by copy and pasting the test from RLCI into the new RLCI pipeline class. And I noticed that I don't get a test failure as I was expecting, and that's because the 0pi build script is not actually running any tests from other modules than RLCI. So I go ahead and fix that. Getting the tests to run for the RLCI pipeline was quite straightforward, but now the problem arises: what to do with the test in RLCI. We don't want to test any pipeline functionality in the app anymore, but we still want to test that it somehow triggers the pipeline. So this is where I start to introduce an engine that has a trigger functionality that can actually trigger the pipeline. And I struggle a lot to get this part working, and I'm not really sure that I'm happy with the end result. Eventually I got it working, and I think I'm still testing all the pieces and testing the relevant functionality in the relevant classes, but it was kind of difficult to write these tests, and that tells me that there probably is a problem with the design. But at the moment I don't see any way to improve it. But this is an area that I will probably come back to and think more about to see if I can make this any better. So one thing that I'm trying to figure out in this agile workflow is how to balance refactorings and adding actual value to the product. And as I understand, you cannot have user stories that don't add value. So you should do refactorings and internal improvements along the way as needed. So what I'm trying to do, what works quite well for me, is to do the refactorings before I implement something. So I'm trying to refactor in a direction that will make it easier to add the functionality that I'm working on. So at this point, I'm not really happy with how the design turned out, but I can test the pipeline in isolation and I can improve that, and that part feels quite okay. So I'm gonna leave the design as it is now and focus on actually adding the value that we wanted to add with the story that we're working on. So making the change to run a pipeline in isolation from other pipelines, from other directories, was quite straightforward at this point. And at this point, I think that the new functionality is in place. One way to test that would be to call the integrate command on the branch, as we did in the previous video, and see what happens. But one more interesting thing we can do is to implement the 0pi integrate script that I talked about in the previous video to actually create the branch and push the branch and all that stuff that's required. So that's what I went ahead and did. In order to add this functionality in the 0pi script, I needed to execute some commands, and I had no wrapper for that, so I had to write that first, and then I was able to write the rest. Then I noticed that I accidentally broke the main program. So before you ran RLCI by invoking the RLCI file, and that has been moved into the RLCI dunder init file. So there's no main program to call anymore. So I added back the RLCI file and had it import RLCI module and call the app. And I was a bit suspicious if this was going to work, having a Python file and a module named the same. But it seems like when you do import RLCI, it prefers the module or the package. So that seems to work in this particular case. And then it was time, the moment of truth, to actually test this. So I had a couple of commits now in the main branch. And the idea is if I run the 0pi integrate script, it should create a branch called branch, push that, and have the RLCI do the integration stuff and merge it back to the main branch. So when I ran it, this is what happened. Success, it seems like it worked. This is a great feeling when practicing test-driven development. When all the tests pass and you run the application for real for the first time and it just works. Doesn't always happen, but definitely more often than if you don't have any tests. So I'm still not quite happy with how the design turned out, and one way to improve it would be for me to just read the code and think about how I would like to structure this instead. But at the same time, I don't want to focus too much on it. I want to have a balance between adding value and doing internal improvements to the design. So it will be interesting to see if I can keep up, like can I incrementally add value to the program and still not build up too big of a technical debt, so that, yeah, it will be interesting to see if that's possible. I guess we'll see. But that's it for this week. I'll see you. Bye.